Hey, welcome back to the CCWSA podcast. I'm Mike Darter in Oklahoma City.
Stan Campbell, partner in crime, right?
Yeah, we have so
I don't
we
want to
have
be
to give
Robin.
a shout out to David today. So David got us for Christmas bobbleheads,
That's right.
which is
They
kind
just
of
came
cool.
in
Stan looks kind of like, a little bit like Ray Charles over there,
just a little
the
bit.
glasses on. I love those blue suede shoes, man.
This is not my color, nor
Those are
would I wear
sweet.
this.
Those are sweet.
But Mike's looks just like him. Got the camera
Yeah.
and got that awesome Richie Cunningham hairstyle.
Richie Cunningham. Wow, I haven't heard that one for a while.
I know. Listen, had to go back. I'm old.
That dates us.
It really
So
does.
we just got back from Cabo. We had a captive conference.
Yes,
Learned some great stuff there for our members.
that's right.
And we're going to be reviewing some new things. So that's going to be coming out.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always good just to, especially how we're designed to strengthen our knowledge in that system. It's to further add value to, our support of you guys. So we love the captive insurance industry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and
it,
they
it
had some
keeps us strong.
they have some great info. It's mainly for us internally on how good things to do for our company, how to structure some things. But it's always good info. And this time, I got in the open ocean with a pod of 6 orcas.
Yeah,
It was incredible. So I never have done underwater photography. I decided that I was going to do mako sharks, which I don't know why I decided that, but went out. We're chumming the water to try to get these makos coming in. It's not in a cage. Like you get in right there with the sharks. And I was thinking, when they said a mako shark is like a great white on cocaine, that's when I started thinking, am I really going to do this? And about that time, we saw some orcas, and the guy was like, "Orcas, orcas, unicorns of the sea, let's go, let's go, let's go, vamos." So we took off and ended up swimming 3 times with these orcas. I should have sent a picture
yeah.
to Justin, but yeah, it was
We
incredible.
might be able to have
It,
them
it was
uploaded in
it
the
was crazy.
description. Let them check
So
that out.
we're back to work now.
Yep.
Got a lot of things going on across the country with this environment right now. Politically, it's just crazy. But I'm excited about it. I think we got some good things going.
Yeah, there's some states out there that are a little challenging. They know who they are, and we're just putting in a good fight.
Yeah. So today we have an awesome guest. You probably heard her name if you're a member of ours or if you follow us. Andrea Luem from Nevada,
That's
from
right.
Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So we can pull her in, Justin, on the screen so people can see her beautiful face rather than ours. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments on this. Get those guys
There
off the
it
screen.
is. That's right.
How are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome.
Good.
He was so, there's not a lot of lawyers that have as many murder trials as, not that I know anyway, that have as many as you do. You have really put in a lot of work when it comes down to murder trials because, there's a lot of attorneys that just don't get them that often.
Well, or self-defense cases in
Yeah.
general.
Oh,
I mean,
so yeah,
Don,
self-defense cases.
since we've been working with Don, I mean, he's like, there's not a lot of attorneys out there who do a lot of self-defense cases. You've done a lot of self-defense cases.
Yeah.
How
a
long have
lot.
you been in the business, Andrea?
So I've been licensed for 20 years now. I started in Colorado. I practiced there for about 5 years. Then I moved to Vegas, and I've been here for 15. So,
And
and
now do you specialize in use of force cases now or in murder trials or?
well, I mean, I don't necessarily have a specialty. I happen to have done a number of self-defense homicide cases over the years. I mean, a lot of them have gone to trial. A lot of them have resolved with plea bargains or dismissals or things like that. But I've tried self-defense cases in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nevada. So I don't know if it's exactly a specialty, but it's definitely something I've done a lot of. So.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a specialty, it's special in that you've worked so many, especially
Right. Right.
yeah. because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen too often, for an attorney to get that many under their belt. So bravo, and this is one of the reasons why we always come back to you when we have members in that area. We want to get them the best local attorney that we can, and we make sure that we take pride in who we hire, and we make sure we ring your phone. You know.
And talking about that, that's kind of the first thing I wanted to really hit on. And we had several cases, but we've had a recent case. Justin, has that been released yet on
No.
the interview? Okay, so it'll be coming out soon. Some info that when we were in Vegas that we shot with the member, information on a case. But the big thing is the importance on having a local attorney, because that's one of the big questions that we get from everybody is, can I use my own attorney? And there's a lot of things, and I'd like for Andrew to talk about this, but and what we've seen in cases in the past is, even if you have that attorney, is he going to be in Cabo or out of the country the week that you have your shooting?
Yeah.
But also just there's a lot of intricate details, I think, and importance and things of importance that you have to take into account in these. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. What you're saying is a good point. So, with respect to, having an attorney that's sort of already on, I guess, retainer, the way I am with you guys is, for example, the case that you were talking about, I think the call from Dawn came, I think it was on Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving night, right? So, if I get a call from Dawn, I know I'm going to answer it, right?
Yeah.
Regardless what I'm doing or who I'm with or whatever. So, if you're in a situation like that where it's a weekend or a holiday, like you said, Mike, even if you have an attorney that's always been your go-to guy, chances are he's not going to pick up the phone if something happens in the middle of the night or on, when you're with your family. So I think that's kind of the difference is having somebody right there ready to go, pick up the phone and then, immediately start working the case. Otherwise, sometimes you have to wait a day, 2 days, 3 days, go through the office and receptionist and everybody else to finally talk to the lawyer versus, within 10 minutes you're on the phone and you're connected. So
that's right.
I think one of the huge benefits that I see.
Yeah, and then we always talk about with CCW Safe and the way that we formed it and designed it. We as former law enforcement officers who understand how important it is to get boots on the ground, people working on your behalf within those first 48 hours. I mean, the TV show really does that justice. 48 hours is really important to get in there and make sure there's no evidence that would be lost. Get your own, investigators out there to get your attorney working for you, because sometimes, just like in this case on the Thanksgiving incident, especially if you can have an attorney that's available for you to get ahead of it, then they can get with the investigators and also the prosecutor and discuss the case and your side of it, your perspective, and even additional evidence prior to them making the determination of whether or not there's going to be charges.
Yeah, and that's one of the things in this case. I mean, to have somebody that already has a reputation with and a relationship already with the people who are going to be working the case, that's important too.
Absolutely.
Somebody who knows that court system, and Andrea obviously knows that court system.
Yeah, and then just to piggyback Mike's thought, in this particular case, the attorney that the member wanted was a good attorney that, that Andrew, you actually worked with him as well, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, he's a great guy. So.
Yeah, so I mean, he was a great attorney, just that he was on vacation. It was a holiday. And that's the importance also, because just like Mike said about us getting those phone calls all the time, we absolutely get them say, hey, can I use my own attorney? But that's the importance of us not just pushing money your way like some of our competitors and just let you have at it. We sit up there and we walk with you and make sure that we help you manage the situation and get you, if you can't find an attorney, because you are welcome to bring attorneys to us to be vetted, and we use them. And if you don't have them, boy, it's great to have Don West there to make these phone calls, like with these experts and these who specialize in use of force cases.
Yeah, and to have a fresh set of eyes on it. It's
Yeah.
always good to have an extra set of eyes on it. Andrea, what is the importance? Do you feel how heavy is the importance to have somebody who knows really the in and outs of the system versus, especially dealing with like murder cases of the
Right.
prosecutors and the investigators involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty huge, I think, because like you said, in the first, day or two, there's a lot that you can do as an attorney to sort of run interference between, I say running interference, but, um, controlling the situation as it progresses, because, right away, everything's pretty hectic and emotions are running high. So if you have an attorney there who's familiar with the detective or the prosecutors that might get the case, then you can, the attorney can reach out. Like, for example, the case we're talking about, I happen to, have that detective's cell phone number. So I, called them up, said, hey, we're going over, to the house. Is there anything you want us to do? Just sort of demonstrate the level of cooperation that we're willing to give in a justified shooting like this. Because that's really what you want to convey is, this was justified. It's a terrible situation, but, we're in control over here, and we want to work with you and get the real story sort of out there. So I think being able to access the investigators and things like that is super important. And if you sort of cold call an attorney out of the phone book, they're probably not going to know those people or have those relationships. And the homicide detectives here, they know that I work for you guys, right? So if I say this is it's a CCW safe case or whatever, then they realize that this is not just some crazy person with a gun who went and shot somebody for no reason. I mean, this is self-defense justified type situation. So I think that your reputation precedes you in that sense. So I think that's all that all plays into having local counsel, not just to have somebody ready and available to go, but somebody who can pick up the phone and make the calls that need to be made as well. So.
Yeah, I think that's huge as well. And you brought up a good point, which a discussion we've gotten into often with our members as well, is how do you cooperate with law enforcement? And we've always said, you want to cooperate as much as possible. You don't want to give a full interview, but simply by saying, hey, look, I'd be happy to sit down and do a full interview with you. I'm willing and I'm cooperative, but right now it's not a good time. I would like to have my attorney present. Giving them just a brief account. This is what happened. Here's my name. Here's my info. Maybe pointing out witnesses, stuff like that is one thing. Getting into a full interview is another. But there are a lot of people who say, "Don't say anything to the police. Don't say anything." And we've had, how many times have you had somebody when you're on a scene? Here, my attorney wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Click.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not going to happen. Police officers are not going to say,
actually
okay,
do
well,
that.
let me take this conference call right quick and get in my. I mean, it's just, and so to be able to, like you say, have that confident cooperation yet controlled, and it's hard because when people have been involved in a critical incident, I think it's human nature for people to immediately want to justify themselves. And because of most of the psychological effects that are going on with you, you're not going to be able to remember, and you're not going to be able. And so what people do is they fill in the gaps with what they think they did or with what they want to justify themselves with, which may not match up to the forensic evidence or other witness statements, which is probably likely because everybody's going to see something different.
That's right.
But that's a good point you brought up, because you want to have that cooperation, but it's got to be controlled. And that's why having somebody like Andrea in place is just, I think it's huge. And I think it can make or break a case.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then I was just thinking, because in this particular case as well, we sent one of our investigators out, former homicide detective, to work with Andrea as well. To even pick up the member, take him over there to meet with Andrea to make sure that the member made it for for the meetings. to give them some insight in reference to have that specialty eye on looking around for additional video footage or cameras and things that a normal person would miss that a salty homicide detective that's actually going to see, and then he can present it to the attorney. So I mean, and how was that experience for you? Because that's actually the first time we actually had one of the investigator guys work with you, correct?
Yeah, that's the first time, and it was actually fantastic. I think he was out here the very next day,
Mm-hmm.
um, and met with myself with the member. We went to the scene where the shooting happened. I mean, that's sort of invaluable to get on top of things that early, and that goes back to the whole taking control of the situation. So we were able to actually see what the member was describing in terms of how it unfolded, and the positions of where he was versus where the person he shot was, and how things progressed, which helped me as his attorney then convey information to the detectives, and it gives me credibility too, saying, hey, I've been there, I was there with my investigator, this is how it appears to have unfolded. If you want to talk to the member more about that, we can, but it helps both myself and I think the client ultimately, for the attorney and the investigator to get in there, see sort of what happened, talk to other witnesses that might have been around. It really sort of raises our ability to convey information in a coherent way, instead of just sort of say, well, I heard from my client that this happened. We were there, we saw it, we walked through, we talked to other witnesses, we've got phone calls or recordings and things like that. So gathering that information from the defense perspective early on is really, really important, because the police do it as soon as they get there, right? And they're the crime scene analysts, and they close off the scene, and they do all the things that they can early on. So why shouldn't we do the same thing?
That's correct.
Right? If we want to, like I was saying, taking control of the situation, I think is really kind of the theme that I see.
Absolutely.
Like,
And then
we're not
I'm
victims
sorry.
here. We're active participants in showing you what really happened and why this was a justified situation. So.
That's right. And then from a law enforcement perspective, and I know, Mike can also agree with this, I mean, depending on when this happens, 'cause a lot of the shooting cases, happen in the evening time. And there, police work, it's shift work. They work a lot of long hours. You never know who you're going to get. And, so it's also a unique dynamic in that when the incident actually happens and the patrol officers get there, you get a huge crowd of people. But it's really funny when the homicide detectives get there, that crowd starts to disperse a little bit. So people who actually who did see something, they start to kind of go in the house because they don't want to get
Yeah.
involved. So that's why when Mike said it's important to say, if you notice somebody saw this and saw what happened, make sure you say, hey, the guy in the red shirt that went in apartment number 2, he saw the whole thing. When I looked up and it was over, I saw the lady in pink. She's over here in apartment number 8 or whatever. I mean, you point these people out so that because they're not going to volunteer because this is the day and age of mind your business. So, but the importance of getting, if there's some evidence that might get lost or anything like that, make sure you let the officers know and the investigators know that this is going to happen. So it's really, really important. You don't want to start with, silence and not help the officers for your case because that's really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and you never know what. I mean, you're talking about during the summertime second shift. Those guys are running call to call. They're barely able to handle their calls in most cities, and they miss things sometimes. And so you want to make sure that you give them everything they need to do the job to keep your freedom,
Absolutely.
which is the utmost importance.
Yeah. And then, and we also kind of give tips too about, seeing, just being aware, and I know Mike's because, when he worked the gang unit and I worked, impact and street as a supervisor, we know because we had special units that we would set our cars back, but the average patrolman that's kind of green, they'll roll over the casings and they'll get
Stuck in the treads.
stuck in the tread,
Yeah.
and they'll roll away with your evidence. So it's really, really important, to make sure you take a look after everything's calm and the officers are almost there and you're in a safe place, behind some cover or whatever. And if there's not any danger, start looking around, scanning, seeing who's around, seeing where things landed, maybe the casings and stuff, to make sure that, hey, there were some casings there before that officer rolled this way, and now they're gone. So, just a lot of stuff you have to pay attention to. But if you think about it ahead, you can prepare yourself for any possible problems with the scene.
Well, and we talked about visualization. So visualization to us is very important. If you're a concealed carrier, if you're a police officer on the street, you're always visualizing what could happen. Pulling into a convenience store, bank, whatever. You're always kind of scanning, doing the things. You're thinking about it. When you're in a safe place at home, what would happen if this happened? I used to fall asleep at night when I was on an entry team. I used to fall asleep at night going through houses. And the visualization is also important to think about not only what would you do, but what are you going to do or say if you were involved in a shooting? Because it is, one of the most common, and we're going to be talking with Dr. Art Wall soon. She's a wealth of information. She's amazing with the physiological effects, and she's talked about the most common with police officers is intense second guessing. You have to know these things up front, and you have to be able to get a handle on that as much as you can, because you don't, by visualizing, okay, what would I do in this situation? At least if you visualize it, you have a plan of action. And
right.
When these physiological effects start coming into effect that take over, then that's a whole new battle that you have to fight. So at least knowing those, and like Stan said, kind of get an idea of, in your mind of what you would do, what you would say, how you would act around law enforcement. A lot of times, law enforcement, they know if they roll on scene and they know the guy's laying there in the street all tatted up and they're like, oh yeah, that's Lil G from West Side. They're going to know. And they may be high-fiving, they may be, hey, good job, whatever. And, we've talked about that. Don't get caught up.
Don't get pulled into that.
Don't get pulled into that, which is easy to do. So you have to think about all these things and kind of have a prepared, not a prepared statement, but you have to be prepared for if that time comes. And, of course, we always teach avoidance. That's the biggest thing.
That's right.
If you're involved in a shooting, it's not going to be the whole rest of your afternoon or week is done. If you have work scheduled somewhere, you're not going. If you have vacation somewhere, you're not going. It will change your life from that point on, and that first week or two is going to be insane. So avoid at all costs.
Absolutely. Hey, Andrew, just to bring you in on this as well, as an attorney who works a lot of self-defense cases, to piggyback what Mike's saying about, number one, having clients that say too much, right? With police officers, and also number two, them second guessing themselves in front of or during an interview possibly, and kind of messing the story up. Can you kind of talk on that a little bit? Any challenges that you might have had with that?
Sure. Well, number one, my advice to my clients is don't speak to the police. I understand what you're saying, maybe give a little bit of information. Obviously, I'm not saying, don't tell them who you are or whatever. You say, I was involved in a shooting. My gun is secured in the bathroom. Here's my name, and this is my attorney. And if I'm going to say anything else, I'd like to have them present, period. Because you really have to make that very, very clear from the beginning that you are willing to speak, but not until you have your attorney present. So I think, showing that you're cooperative, that you're willing to, perhaps give a statement, but you want to do it right. I honestly think that most police officers and detectives I've seen over the years, they respect that. A lot, and I think they'll, obviously that they're not allowed to continue speaking to you once you invoke your right to counsel. But I don't believe that they treat you any differently if you say, look, I'm concealed carry card holder. Here's my card. Here's my attorney's number. And they say, oh, okay. So that's number one. Number two, once you have an attorney there, one-on-one with the client without the police, then you can really just let it all out, right? So here's what happened, and break it down completely. Because as an attorney, I can sort of parse through what you're telling me, things that I think you maybe got wrong, or perhaps don't really jive with the physical evidence, and then sort of follow up and say, hey, can we clarify that? Because that does not make sense to me. Like, your chronology seems like it's off based on what I saw. And so once you're one-on-one with the attorney and the investigator too, if there's an investigator there, then you can, the member, or I call him client, can really work through what happened in their mind and verbalize it a little bit better than they would if they were just immediately taken down to the homicide unit and hey, here, we're going to push play on the recorder, let's go. You just don't want to do that, because that's forever going to follow you. So taking the time to really think about what happened, to explain it to your attorney and investigator, and have them analyze it, talk you through it, I think really helps. Because when you're preparing to do that actual formal interview with the detectives, if that's what you decide to do, you want to make sure you're not stepping into anything that doesn't make sense. And like I think you said, Mike, sometimes you don't remember things correctly, and it's not to say that for me that my clients lying or embellishing or withholding information. It's just your memory at the moment that super scary thing happened might not have recorded it exactly, precisely correctly. So that's one thing. Also, going into an interview like that too, you want to be prepared for what types of questions you're going to be asked, how you should answer, not just the words to use, but maybe the emotion you want to convey, because sometimes a shooting situation can be, if it's a family member or somebody like that, it's a super emotional situation. So those are just sort of aspects I think that you want to work through with your attorney before you ever walk into an interview room. Also, make sure that as the member, you want them to know what the other witnesses said, any information that the attorney can get a hold of from the police before they walk in. Just so, well, this witness says this, you're telling me this, so let's try to figure out what the truth actually is.
Yes.
And then you also want to prepare a client for the tough questions, because there's going to be some that might be kind of hard. And then let them know what the sort of softball questions are going to be too. So, and most of that's pretty, after doing this for a number of years and sitting through a lot of these interviews, I'm not saying that detectives are predictable, but I mean, they're smart. And if you don't have, your ducks in a row and you're not making a lot of sense, then you're going to get yourself into more trouble, I think. So.
Yeah, and then the more experienced investigators, I mean, they've interviewed a lot on these cases, so they're gonna know. They're gonna know that you may be, or you may be that kind of person that you want to share with your attorney that hey, when I get nervous, I actually kind of I get quiet. I mean, they might need to be aware that you don't look cold, like you don't care that you just took a life. Or you're not too excited about it, because that too could play against you. One thing I wanted to add to what Andrew was talking about when you're talking, not saying anything in front of the police, you do have to be mindful of a couple of things. One is, because like with Maddox, he ended up being interviewed in front, I think either maybe right in front of the patrol car initially, when he first was given the information, but you have the recorded cameras that could play against you. And also, if you get in the back of the police car, I mean, you don't have the right to your privacy. So you got we recorded in our cars all the time. So and voice recorders catch you. So don't get on the phone talking to your friends. Don't get. I mean, your attorney. I mean, it's not going to be privileged there if you just start talking. Any you know. Verbal utterances, you know, something that you just might say, like Mike said, the high fiving, and stay away from that. But there's a lot of things, and then also when you get to the police station, that is the same thing. Recorded lines. If you start, because Maddox did that as well. He gave a full interview prior to us, getting there. I mean, that's probably the only thing I think that he did wrong. Was giving that interview.
And the biggest thing, one thing I want to make sure everybody knows is all these things that we're talking about is not to try to cover something up or try to hide something, or it's to try to protect you because like intense second guessing, even I could have done this is a huge statement because it relays that, well, if you could have done that, why didn't you do that? So looking back on it, and these are not things that, it's things to protect yourself from your own self, because like I said, you don't know what happened. I know firsthand. I remember hours, 6-8 hours after my shooting, sitting on my couch, trying to piece it together, like what happened, trying to go through it. And days later, I mean, it takes time, and that's why there's 24, 48 hour 2 sleep cycles with IACP recommendations for police officers involved in on-duty shootings. There's all these things that come into play that really don't apply to civilians.
That's right.
Or even a retired officer. So they're not things, when we talk about the things, I don't want people to think, you shouldn't say this. It's not because it's something to hide. It's something to protect yourself because you just don't know. The memory distortion and all that, it's just, it can play a huge role. And if you don't get a handle on that early and understand how those things work, then you just become a babbling brook like I am right now.
I know you're
just
not.
Keep talking and keep talking and talking about stuff. And that's what that's what a good investigator is going to do. He's going to do this. He's going to sit here just like this. And when you stop talking, you shake your head, and then you're going to start talking again.
Yeah.
And it's just human nature. So, yeah, all these.
I just wanted to. I want to agree with you and just say this is not. Yeah, these aren't defense attorney tricks.
No,
right.
I mean,
right. Exactly.
These are the rules for police officers too. And so, just owning the situation, taking control, saying, here this is a silly analogy, but it's kind of like when you're when women are pregnant and having babies, like you want to have a plan, right? Your birthing plan or whatever before you go to the hospital, because everything changes once you get in there, and you're freaking out and you're in pain and this and that. So if you plan it out ahead, then you have control over that situation. If you think ahead of time, like, okay, I have my concealed carry permit, I have my insurance, I know the attorney number that I'm going to call. If something were to happen, then when your emotions start running high, you do take back that control of the situation and sort of lock it down. And I can't agree more that it's not a trick, it's not a game, it's not playing hide the ball or whatever. It's making sure that the information that you convey is completely and totally accurate and thorough, as opposed to, this piecemeal sort of babbling body cam situation. So, it's just staying focused, staying in control of the situation, because once you lose control, then, that's it.
Right.
Andrea, this is Justin. I have a question for you. It's something that was really important in the Maddox case, and maybe you can speak to, is as an attorney, having the resources for expert witnesses, being able to get people, if somebody's got to travel in to testify, or just having resources there, which is a big part of what we provide, and it was a big part of the Maddox case. Could you speak to, how important that is versus someone who is kind of going it on their own and doesn't have those resources?
Yeah, of course. So a self-defense shooting, whether it's a homicide or something less, let's just say like somebody's shot but not dead, either one, In addition to the attorney's fees, there's so many other things that come into play, right? We talked about the investigator, so having somebody on your side to interview witnesses, collect, potentially collect evidence, things like that. Experts, so use of force experts, for example, crime scene reconstruction experts. There's all kinds of, ballistics experts. And those people are not cheap. And I know from years and years and years of doing this that, their fees oftentimes run higher than the attorney fees. So you take all of that, plus the attorney fees, plus, like you were saying, Justin, flying people in to testify or sending out investigators to issue subpoenas. Those are the kinds of miscellaneous costs that people don't think about when they go out and hire an attorney. So a lot of attorneys will say, well, okay, I'll take your case. I'm going to give you a flat fee figure, whatever, $100,000, $200,000. That's their fee, right? So that goes in the attorney's pocket. And then they say, well, on top of that, you have investigators, you have experts, you have costs, filing fees, just all this sort of miscellaneous stuff that adds up that people don't really think about, that could easily, go well above the attorney fee. Another danger too with, and it could be different in other jurisdictions, but in Nevada or in Las Vegas anyway, a lot of attorneys will quote clients for just portions of representation, right? So I'll take your case now. So you get a family member gets on the phone and says, my husband shot somebody, I need an attorney. And they say, okay, well, I'll take the case for $25,000. I'm just throwing that out there. And the wife will say, well, that sounds really good to me, right? And they're not really thinking it through and maybe not looking at the paperwork. But a lot of times when you read the retainer agreements, that goes, so from the time you're hired until, like, say, the preliminary hearing, right? Which could happen within the first month or two of the incident. And then they have to re-up, right? So, well, now if you want me to continue representing you, it's going to be another $50,000. Right. And then people a lot of times at that point are like, wait, what just happened? Oh, and by the way, if you want to go to trial, then it's going to be another, X amount of dollars, plus all these fees for experts and investigators and things like that. And so the costs really can become totally overwhelming, I think, to most people. Most people don't have that kind of money just sitting in the bank ready to throw at a lawyer and potential experts that you may or may not even end up using. Just sort of, I've had that happen where we've hired experts and they don't help us. So we don't end up calling them as witnesses, but we still have to pay them. So.
That's right.
We had that happen in the Maddox case. We had some witnesses, experts that we didn't use, and that's not. We haven't even talked about bail.
That's right.
Bail is another. If it's a shooting, and if there's a death involved, it's probably going to be $500,000 to $1 million. If it's not, there's not a death involved. It may be lower, but from what we've seen historically and seen across the country is it's going to be, $50,000 just to get out of jail. And that's a huge chunk day one that you're never, ever going to see again because it's just gone.
And the bail issue is so important too, because, if you're arrested and there's a bail set, if you don't post that, so that's almost like your number one priority, right?
That's
because if you don't post bail, you sit in jail, then you're not out working, earning money, and able to pay for all these other things. So, so the bail issue is huge. That's one of the amazing benefits, I think, of the company is the bail consideration, because that. You just don't know, and it can be sort of arbitrary. Sometimes the judge will say, well, this looks like maybe it was a justified shooting, so I'll set your bail at, $150,000. Oh, well, thanks a lot, judge. But compared to some other cases,
that's right.
That could be, fairly low for this particular, for this particular judge. So, yeah.
And that's there's so many other things involved. If you get out of jail, are you still going to have a job? Are they going to
Right.
fire you because you've now been charged with murder one, or you've been even involved in a murder one case or a self-defense shooting? I mean, it's just you got to have a plan. So
Yeah.
Definitely.
So Andrea, as we come to the end of the show, I know you have another murder case coming up real soon, and you just finished one. Um, and I know a lot of the information is still sensitive, but could you kind of tell us some of the challenges that you might have had, because you actually won your case. Congratulations. And and then I asked you earlier off camera about how many were on your team. It was very impressive that you said no, it was just me as the attorney and my investigator. Explain to us to the audience about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, so about the team, a lot, but most of the time the team is me. And obviously, an investigator and then whatever experts I hire and things like that are, I guess, considered a part of the team. But when you're actually in trial, in court, it's myself and the client against the government and everybody else.
That's
so
right.
you sometimes feel like the cards are kind of
Stacked.
stacked. Right. Thank you.
Uh,
But if you're on the side of right and you're prepared and you've done your work going in, then it's all right. It's okay to be by yourself or whatever. Not have this huge dream team of attorneys. I don't think you need that when you've got the facts on your side. So this case recently it was actually a defense of others case, which is a little even trickier than self-defense because you have to demonstrate that the shooting was justified in that that you believed that the person that what you were witnessing, that person was about to be either killed or seriously injured, and you had to take action. And so one of the interesting things about the case was finding witnesses who were also present at the scene but were unarmed. And we're doing other things to try to de-escalate the situation. So like, for example, one witness had reached over, we saw him in the video, he reached over to pick up a stool to try to, hit the person that had the gun and was about to shoot this other individual. And then a few other like unarmed security guards that said, yeah, if I'd have had a gun, I would have used it. So ultimately, our client, did have a weapon and did have to use it and save the guy's life. And so, so the jury agreed and said, that had to happen. And it was, it's unfortunate. Nobody ever wants to take a life, but there are situations where somebody that you care about, or maybe somebody you don't even know, like this situation, but you can see that something terrible is about to happen to that person or other people, and you have to act. And so, the law protects you. And then, it's not always self-defense. Sometimes it's defending somebody else. And so that's what happened here. And
I'm sure there's a lot of challenges. I mean, every case is going to be different, and every case is going to have its own set of challenges. A lot of them probably be similar. Like we were talking earlier about the investigation, there's no two shootings are going to be the same, but there are going to be aspects of that are going to be similar, and the challenges are just, they can just be daunting at times, I imagine, especially on some of the cases that you've worked.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's why it's really important just to do a thorough investigation, talk to as many witnesses as you can, and just really try to understand it from your client's perspective, like, that person was going through, and why they did the thing that they ultimately had to do. And if you can convey that story to the jury in a way that makes sense to them, that this was reasonable and it had to happen, then I mean, jurors are smart people. They don't leave their common sense at home, right? So it's just a lot of it is just preparation.
Do you use like jury consultants often, or?
Not really. I've used them once before, and I don't feel like they really helped that much. you sort of strategize ahead of time going into a trial, like what's the type of juror that I want on a case like this, what kind of background, or typically in a self-defense case, you want jurors that aren't afraid of firearms. There's a lot of people that are scared to death of guns, and just the idea of a gun, they raises their blood pressure and they freak out. So you really don't want those people on your jury, because they'll have a harder time understanding the situation that your client was in. So people that are from, not necessarily avid shooters or anything like that, but just people that aren't generally not afraid of weapons, and people that believe you have the right to defend yourself if you feel like your life is being threatened. There's some people that just totally reject that, and they say, no matter what, it doesn't matter, you should walk away, run away, hide. Those are the kind of people you definitely don't want on a jury, like on a self-defense shooting, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, one of the things we do, and we don't do it all the time, but we try to do it all the time, is kind of key takeaways for our members of from what we got. My key takeaway on this is going to be preparedness. I mean, you just have to be prepared, and it's kind of it can kind of be overwhelming, because the preparedness is going to be this wide cast, and but if you have a firearm and carry it, then just be prepared, and get everything. Knowledge is the biggest thing. Know and have a good understanding of what's going to happen, not only to survive the physical fight, but also the legal and the emotional and mental, which is what a lot of what we talk about.
Okay, and on from my perspective, I mean, there's a lot of takeaways here, but I'm gonna narrow it down to trust your attorney. Don't let your mouth overrun the situation. So just say just enough, and then make sure you shut it down and request an attorney before you say anything further. Because I mean, this is so important, because everything you do in that first, couple of hours could dig you into a hole that is hard to get out of. The other thing is, when you give a full statement, the police officers, that's your report. So when they present that evidence later and you change your story, sometimes the jury's going to look at you and say, okay, the lawyer helped them make this new story up, so it looks like you were lying. So be careful about that. Be careful about what you say. Andrea? You got to jump in too.
Well, I guess the takeaway, or the major point that I think you should keep in mind is as much as it's not something you want to do, maybe think it through, visualize something terrible happening, and how you're going to respond if it does. So, I carry a gun. I have a concealed carry permit, Mike, like you're saying. I've got all my sort of ducks in a row. Now, if someone were, let's just say, to come to my house and try to break in, and I had to shoot them, thinking it through it in your mind, like, okay, number one, I'm going to do this. Number two, I'm going to secure my firearm. Number two, I'm going to go, call the police. Number three, I'm going to tell them once they get here that I want to talk to my attorney and have them present. Because you don't necessarily want to be on the phone with your attorney when the cops show up. But so sort of thinking those steps through ahead of time and having that plan in place, I think is really important. And part of that plan, Stan, like you're saying, is lock it down, right? So, here I am. Here's what happened in 5 words or less, right? And here's my attorney's number. So let's get him on the phone.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, Andrea, as always, thanks for being on. We appreciate you. Great to see you again. Best of luck in your new cases coming up.
That's right. Thanks for all that you do for us, Andrea, and our members. We appreciate you.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
I'm going to end this with one. We got a contact from our website, so we sent out a Tumblr to Paul Medley. A member wrote in, and he said, I just watched episode 53 February 26th, the interview with Don West, the video version. It's so much better as video to see your sincerity. At least it appears you guys really care about what you do in regards to education and defense of a member. And this is true. I mean, we take this very seriously, and it's not because, hey, we think this would be a great company and a great idea to start. It's because we've been involved in this and we've been victimized ourselves. Myself, I was sued in federal court on a shooting. Stan's been sued in federal court doing his job as a police officer. And we know that that's real. And we know, what can happen during that time. But we also know that you can overcome it if you have the resources. And because we had, fraternal order police memberships at the time. The FOP covered everything. It took a huge stress off of not only ourselves, off of our families, off of kids. I mean, it just alleviates that to the point to where you can get through it a lot easier. And we believe in it, and that's why we do what we do. And
absolutely.
You got anything?
Yeah, and then for those who have friends and family members that are concealed carriers, make sure you share this content with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of great nuggets that we provide. Educational stuff and tips and things. So share our podcast with your family members, and if you really care about them, tell them to go to ccwsafe.com and become members as well. Be part of our family. You guys be safe.
Follow us on social media: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and comment. And we're still going to send out some more tumblers. So comment, send us an email on what you think. Guys, be safe.